What are the international laws for humanitarian intervention? Imagine a situation where a country is suffering from mass killings or ethnic cleansing, and the world wants to step in to help. But how does international law guide such actions? That's what we're here to understand. International laws surrounding humanitarian intervention are quite complex. They try to balance respecting a country's sovereignty with protecting human rights. Humanitarian intervention is when one or more countries use military force across borders without the host country's permission. The goal is to stop or prevent severe human rights violations like genocide or ethnic cleansing. At the heart of international law is the idea of state sovereignty. This means a country has control over its own territory and affairs. The United Nations Charter, which is the main international legal document, generally forbids countries from using force against others unless it's for self-defense or if the United Nations Security Council approves. So, if a country intervenes without permission or Security Council approval, it might be breaking international law. However, there are rules under international humanitarian law, also called the law of armed conflict. These rules protect civilians, medical workers, and aid organizations during conflicts. They also limit how wars can be fought. But international humanitarian law does not give countries the right to use force to interfere in another country's internal issues. It only applies once a conflict has started. The debate gets more complicated because humanitarian intervention involves using force inside a sovereign state. Some argue that, if a government fails to protect its people from serious abuses, the world can override sovereignty to save lives. This idea is reflected in the doctrine called the responsibility to protect. It states that the international community has a duty to act when a state cannot or will not stop mass atrocities. Despite this, there is no clear international law that explicitly allows humanitarian intervention without Security Council approval. When countries do intervene for humanitarian reasons without this approval, it often sparks controversy. Critics say such actions can be driven by political motives or serve national interests. Practically, humanitarian interventions face many legal and ethical questions. They involve using military force without the consent of the host country, which raises questions about legality and legitimacy. The main aim is to prevent or stop serious human rights abuses, which is an ethical priority. But they also challenge the respect for sovereignty and requiring broad international support to avoid accusations of unilateralism or imperialism. In the end, the intersection of ethics and politics makes humanitarian intervention a tricky issue. When is it morally right to override sovereignty to save lives? How can the world ensure interventions are genuinely for humanitarian purposes and not driven by other interests? And how should international law evolve to better address these challenges? These questions keep the debate alive and shape how the world responds to crises today.